The 20th floor of Sterling Corporate pierced the Chicago skyline like a glass needle, its windows reflecting the city's amber glow. Henry Webb pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway, the squeak of its wheels echoing off walls lined with oil paintings worth more than his annual salary. He'd been working the night shift, invisible to the executives who ruled these halls during daylight hours. The mop hit polished granite as he froze. Through the frosted glass of Conference Room B, a silhouette hunched over the mahogany table. CEO Amanda Blackwell. The woman who commanded boardrooms with surgical precision now sat trembling, her designer blazer wrinkled. One manicured hand pressed desperately against her temple. Her breathing came in sharp, panicked gasps. Her left eye twitched once, twice, and Henry's chest tightened with dread. Those symptoms, he'd seen them before. Stroke, imminent, fatal. In the next 60 seconds, Henry Webb would make a decision that would save Amanda Blackwell's life and change both of theirs forever. Henry's calloused hand hesitated on the brass door handle, every instinct warring against protocol. He was the night janitor, the invisible man who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. She was Amanda Blackwell, whose face graced Forbes covers, whose decisions moved stock prices across 3 continents. But through the frosted glass, he watched her left arm slip uselessly from the table, watched her face contort in confusion as she tried to focus on her laptop screen. The symptoms were textbook perfect: facial drooping, arm weakness, speech that would come out slurred if she tried to talk. Henry's late wife, Rachel, had drilled these signs into him during her years as a stroke specialist at Chicago General Hospital. Rachel had made him promise to never ignore these warning signs, no matter who needed help. The conference room doors swung open with barely a whisper. Amanda's head jerked up at the sound, her eyes struggling to focus on Henry's face. When she opened her mouth to speak, the words came out thick and garbled. I'm fine, just tired." But her left hand lay motionless against the mahogany table, completely unresponsive when she tried to lift it. Terror flashed across her features as the reality hit her. Something was desperately, catastrophically wrong. Henry already had his phone out, fingers dialing 911 with steady precision. "Ma'am, you're having a stroke. Try to stay calm." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had watched Rachel guide countless families through medical crises. Amanda's eyes widened in shock, not just at his words, but at the absolute certainty in his tone. The ambulance screamed through downtown Chicago's empty streets, its red and blue lights painting the corporate district in urgent colors. Henry had stayed with Amanda through every moment, positioning her correctly to prevent further damage, checking her pulse, and breathing the way Rachel had taught him during late-night conversations about emergency response. The paramedics had looked surprised when this janitor rattled off medical terminology with casual precision, when he answered their questions about symptom onset and progression with clinical accuracy. As they loaded Amanda onto the stretcher, she managed to grab Henry's sleeve with her good hand. "How did you know?" she whispered, her speech already clearer thanks to the clot-busting medication coursing through her IV. Henry looked down at this powerful woman who suddenly seemed so fragile, so utterly human. "My wife was a stroke specialist," he said simply. "She taught me to never miss the signs." Morning brought unexpected visitors to Henry's small apartment in Millfield, a working-class suburb south of downtown. He had just finished making breakfast for his 8-year-old son, Oliver, scrambled eggs and toast cut into dinosaur shapes, the same ritual they'd maintained since Rachel's death. The knock on his door revealed Amanda Blackwell, looking smaller somehow in jeans and a simple blue sweater instead of her usual armor of designer suits. She carried a bouquet of sunflowers and wore an expression Henry couldn't quite decipher, gratitude mixed with something that looked almost like wonder. "Mr. Webb," she began, then stopped herself with a small shake of her head. "I don't even know your first name." Henry wiped his hands on his faded jeans, acutely aware of their threadbare knees next to her probably $1,000 casual wear. "It's Henry, ma'am. How are you feeling?" Oliver peeked around his father's legs with the fearless curiosity of childhood, studying this unexpected visitor with wide brown eyes. Amanda crouched down to his level, her face softening into the kind of genuine smile Henry suspected few people ever saw. "And who is this handsome young man?" she asked, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to surprise even her. "This is Oliver," Henry said, his protective hand settling on his son's shoulder. "Ollie, this is Ms. Blackwell. She was sick last night, and Daddy helped her feel better." Amanda's smile grew wider, transforming her entire face. "Your daddy saved my life, Oliver. Do you know how incredibly special that makes him?" Oliver puffed out his chest with pride, beaming at the praise for his hero. "Daddy knows lots about sick people because Mommy taught him before she went to heaven." The innocent words hit Amanda like a physical blow, and she looked up at Henry with sudden understanding etched across her features. Here was a man raising a child alone, working night shifts to keep food on the table, who had saved her life with knowledge inherited from a wife who was no longer there. The mathematics of his sacrifice suddenly became clear. Every hour he spent cleaning corporate offices was an hour away from his son. Every dollar he earned came at the cost of sleep and personal time. "I was wondering," Amanda said carefully, rising to her full height, "if you'd let me take you both to lunch. There's a lot I'd like to know about the man who saw what my own doctors somehow missed." Henry hesitated, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. Gratitude was one thing, but the gulf between their worlds was vast and unbridgeable. Still, something in Amanda's expression, a loneliness that mirrored his own, made him nod slowly. "Oliver would like that," he said. "He doesn't get out much on weekends." The restaurant Amanda chose surprised Henry, not some upscale establishment where he'd feel awkward and out of place, but Mel's Pancake House on Old Route 66, where truckers and working families gathered around formica tables for comfort food and honest conversation. She seemed different here, more relaxed, laughing when Oliver insisted on ordering chocolate chip pancakes for lunch and teaching him to make towers out of sugar packets. "Tell me about your wife," she said quietly while Oliver was distracted by the vintage jukebox in the corner, feeding at quarters and delighting in the mechanical whir of changing records. Henry's weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug, drawing warmth from the ceramic. "Rachel worked stroke rehabilitation at Chicago General. Every night when she came home, she'd quiz me on symptoms, patient responses, medication protocols. Said you never knew when medical knowledge might save someone's life." He paused, watching Oliver bounce to the rhythm of an old Motown song. "She died in a car accident, coming home from a double shift." Amanda reached across the scarred formica table and briefly touched his hand, a gesture so gentle it made his throat tighten. "I'm so sorry, Henry, and you've been raising Oliver alone since then." Henry nodded, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her, how she listened without the suffocating pity he'd grown to dread from well-meaning neighbors and church ladies. There was something about Amanda Blackwell that invited honesty, perhaps the way she looked directly at him when he spoke, as if his words actually mattered. "It's been hard," he admitted. "The night shift pays better, but it means I sleep while he's at school and work while he's asleep. We get weekends together, though. That's something." Amanda studied his face with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "You're a remarkable man, Henry Webb," she said finally. "More remarkable than you probably realize." Their conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, flowing with surprising ease despite the obvious differences in their backgrounds. Amanda talked about the isolation of executive life, the endless meetings and power struggles that left little room for genuine human connection. Henry shared stories about Oliver's latest adventures, his struggles with math homework, his elaborate plans for a career as either a dinosaur hunter or a pizza chef. "What I don't understand," Amanda said eventually, stirring cream into her third cup of coffee, "is why my personal physician didn't catch any of the warning signs you spotted immediately. I've been having headaches for months, dizzy spells, moments where I lose track of conversations mid-sentence." Henry frowned, his inherited medical knowledge raising red flags. "Those are textbook stroke precursors. Any competent neurologist should have ordered immediate testing. MRI, CT scan, comprehensive blood work. What did your doctor tell you?" Amanda's expression darkened slightly, a shadow crossing her features. "Dr. Patterson said it was executive stress, prescribed sleeping pills, and told me to take a vacation." Something cold and unpleasant settled in Henry's stomach. No physician worth his medical degree would dismiss those symptoms in a 42-year-old woman, especially not one with Amanda's obvious stress levels and demanding lifestyle. Either Dr. Patterson was grossly incompetent or something far more sinister was at play, something that made Amanda Blackwell's declining health very convenient for someone else. Henry kept these thoughts to himself for now, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. Maybe you should get a second opinion, he suggested carefully, from someone who doesn't know about your corporate responsibilities. Fresh eyes might see things differently. Amanda considered this, absently watching Oliver attempt to teach the jukebox to play his favorite song by pressing the buttons in different combinations. You know, she said slowly, you might be right. Independence might be exactly what I need. An unlikely friendship bloomed between the CEO and the janitor. Amanda began showing up at Mel's Pancake House every Sunday afternoon, always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood, always bringing small gifts for Oliver. Art supplies, books about dinosaurs, a vintage baseball glove that had belonged to her brother. Henry watched her with his son and saw something he hadn't expected in someone so powerful, a profound loneliness that mirrored his own. Despite her penthouses and private jets, Amanda Blackwell ate dinner alone every night, woke up to empty silence every morning. She's sad like you used to be, Daddy, Oliver had whispered to him one evening after Amanda dropped them off at home, before you started smiling again. Henry realized his son was absolutely right. For the first time since Rachel's death, he was looking forward to something beyond just surviving each day. Amanda insisted on covering Oliver's school expenses for the year, a gesture that simultaneously filled Henry with gratitude and stung his pride. It's not charity, she said firmly when he tried to protest. It's an investment in a child whose father saved my life. Consider it a scholarship. She also started texting Henry throughout the week, photos of sunsets from her office window, funny articles she thought he'd enjoy, questions about Oliver's latest projects. Henry found himself looking forward to these small connections, these glimpses into the person behind the corporate facade. He began responding with pictures of Oliver's artwork, updates on their weekend adventures, occasionally a photo of something beautiful he'd noticed during his solitary night shifts. They were building something fragile and precious, though neither dared to name it. One Sunday, Amanda didn't appear at the diner. Henry told himself it was fine, that he'd been foolish to expect their unusual friendship to continue indefinitely. People like Amanda Blackwell didn't maintain relationships with people like him. Eventually, reality reasserted itself, and the fantasy ended. But when Henry returned to Sterling Corporate for his cleaning rounds, he found Amanda slumped over her desk, and this time her symptoms were different, but equally terrifying. Her right hand trembled uncontrollably as she tried to sign documents, and when she looked up at him, her pupils were completely different sizes, one dilated, one constricted. I'm calling 911, Henry said immediately, but Amanda shook her head with desperate urgency. No, please. If the board finds out I'm having more medical episodes, they'll remove me as CEO. Wilson Hart has been waiting for any excuse to stage a coup. Henry's fingers stilled on his phone as he processed Amanda's dilemma. She was caught between her health and her career, between survival and the empire she'd spent decades building. Amanda, you could be having another stroke. This is your life we're talking about. But even as he said it, he understood the impossible position she was in. A CEO showing signs of serious neurological problems would be voted out faster than the paperwork could be filed. Let me drive you to the hospital myself, Henry offered. We'll say you're there for routine tests, preventive care, no ambulance, no corporate notification, no emergency room drama. Amanda's grateful expression made his chest tighten with an emotion he wasn't ready to acknowledge. They were crossing into territory that went far beyond gratitude, into something that could complicate both their lives in ways they weren't prepared for. The emergency room at Chicago General was like stepping into Henry's past. These were the halls where Rachel had worked, where he'd spent countless hours waiting for her to finish shifts, where she'd taught him to read medical charts and understand the language of crisis. Chen, one of Rachel's former colleagues, took one look at Amanda's symptoms and immediately ordered a comprehensive neurological workup. These aren't stress symptoms, she told them bluntly. This is serious brain chemistry dysfunction. We need to find out what's causing it before permanent damage occurs. While they waited for test results in a sterile examination room, Amanda reached for Henry's hand with surprising urgency. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for tonight, but for seeing me. Really seeing me as a person, not just a title or a bank account or a corporate asset. Henry looked down at their intertwined fingers, her manicured nails against his roughened skin, her expensive watch next to his father's old Timex. Someone once told me that everyone deserves to be treated like a human being first, he said softly. My wife believed that every patient was someone's most important person. Dr. Chen returned with results that drained the color from Amanda's face and made Henry's medical training scream warnings. The brain scans showed multiple small areas of damage consistent with repeated mini-strokes, the kind that often went undetected but indicated serious underlying cardiovascular problems. Ms. Blackwell, you need immediate intervention, Duchen explained, her voice carrying the weight of a serious diagnosis. Blood thinners, lifestyle modifications, and most importantly, we need to identify why these episodes keep happening. This pattern isn't random. There's an underlying cause we're missing, something systematic. Amanda squeezed Henry's hand tighter, her composure finally cracking. My personal physician has been monitoring me for months. Dr. Patterson assured me everything was within normal parameters. Dr. Chen's expression grew troubled, then suspicious. I'd like to review those test results, if you don't mind, because what I'm seeing here suggests either gross medical negligence or something far more deliberate. The words hung in the air like an accusation, and Henry felt Amanda's hand begin to shake. Not from neurological symptoms this time, but from pure fear. Someone might be deliberately overlooking her health problems, allowing her condition to deteriorate for reasons that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with power. Dr. Patterson has been my physician for years, Amanda said slowly. He's on the Sterling Corporate Medical Board, comes highly recommended, handles all the executive health screenings. Henry's mind was already racing through possibilities. None of them good. A physician with access to Amanda's complete medical history. Someone who could manipulate test results or delay critical diagnoses. Someone who might have financial incentives to keep the CEO of Sterling Corporate in declining health. We need to see those test results, Henry said grimly. All of them, and we need to see them tonight. What they discovered in Amanda's medical files over the next several hours made Henry sick to his stomach. Every blood test, every scan, every diagnostic procedure had been subtly falsified. Not enough to be obviously wrong, but enough to hide the progressive cardiovascular damage that should have triggered immediate intervention. Amanda's blood pressure readings had been reported as normal when they were actually dangerously elevated. Her cholesterol levels had been fudged downward, her inflammatory markers minimized, her neurological function tests deliberately misinterpreted. Someone with medical knowledge and administrative access had been systematically covering up Amanda's deteriorating health, gambling with her life for unknown but undoubtedly sinister purposes. Wilson Hart, Amanda whispered as the evidence mounted. He's been positioning himself as my successor. If I died or became medically incapacitated, he'd automatically assume control of the company. Henry stared at the falsified documents spread across the hospital conference table, his hands shaking with rage at the calculated cruelty of it all. We need to contact the FBI, Henry said, but Amanda shook her head with bitter practicality. With what concrete proof? Hart's too intelligent to leave obvious fingerprints, and Dr. Patterson will claim he was following standard protocols. If I make accusations I can't definitively prove, Hart will destroy my reputation and my company before I can gather more evidence. Her words stung Henry, not because they were intended to wound, but because they highlighted the brutal reality of their situation. In Amanda's world of boardrooms and power brokers, his knowledge meant nothing without the right credentials, the proper education, the acceptable social standing. Maybe that's exactly why this story matters, Henry said quietly, an idea beginning to form in his mind. Maybe the fact that I'm nobody special is what makes this narrative powerful. A working-class janitor with inherited medical knowledge, saving a CEO's life, not once, but twice, while her expensive private physician missed obvious warning signs. The media would absolutely love this story. Amanda stopped pacing and stared at him with something that might have been hope mixed with terror. What exactly are you suggesting? Henry took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to propose would change both their lives irrevocably. We go public. Tell the whole story, how a janitor spotted symptoms that a board-certified physician somehow missed, how corporate medicine failed where basic human observation succeeded. If Hart has been planning to take over after your death or incapacitation, having your survival become a national news sensation completely ruins his timeline. The plan was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Henry would tell his story to the media, the night janitor whose late wife's medical knowledge had saved Amanda Blackwell's life twice, while her personal physician missed textbook stroke symptoms. The human interest angle would be irresistible. David versus Goliath, working class hero, the triumph of basic human decency over corporate indifference. If Hart's been orchestrating this medical conspiracy, Henry explained, public scrutiny will force his hand. He'll have to make some kind of move to protect himself, and when he does, we'll be ready to document it. Amanda studied his face with a mixture of admiration and horror. You're talking about destroying your privacy, Henry, your quiet life, Oliver's safety, your ability to work anonymously. You'd be sacrificing everything. Henry thought about his son, about the world he wanted to leave him, about Rachel's fundamental belief that medical knowledge should serve humanity regardless of social status. Some things are worth the sacrifice. The story broke like a bomb detonating in the corporate media landscape. The Chicago Tribune ran it on the front page with a headline that captured the public imagination. Night janitor's medical knowledge saves CEO's life twice. Every major news outlet in the country was running variations of the story, and Henry's phone hadn't stopped ringing. News vans lined the street outside his apartment building. Reporters shoving microphones in his face every time he tried to leave. Oliver was safely at school, but Henry knew their quiet life was over forever. The most important call came from FBI agent Sarah Martinez, who had been investigating financial irregularities at Sterling Corporate as part of a broader probe into healthcare fraud. Mr. Webb, she said, her voice carrying the authority of federal law enforcement, we've been looking for exactly the kind of insider testimony you can provide. Are you willing to help us build a criminal case against the people who endangered Ms. Blackwell's life? Henry looked out his window at the media circus his life had become and thought about Amanda, about Oliver, about all the people who might be saved if they could stop Hart in his conspiracy. Yes, he said without hesitation, but I want guarantees about Amanda's safety. She's a victim in this situation, not a co-conspirator. Agent Martinez assured him that Amanda would be treated as a witness rather than a suspect. And within hours, Henry found himself in a federal building downtown, telling his story to a room full of investigators who hung on every word. His working-class accent and obvious sincerity made him a compelling witness. And when he described watching Amanda's symptoms with knowledge inherited from his late wife, several seasoned agents had to look away. I didn't save Amanda Blackwell because she was a CEO, Henry told them. I saved her because she was a human being in medical crisis, and I had the knowledge to help. That's what Rachel would have wanted me to do. The FBI investigation moved with surprising speed once they had Henry's testimony and Amanda's medical records as evidence. Hart had been arrogant in his confidence, leaving a digital paper trail that connected him to Dr. Patterson through a series of offshore accounts and shell companies. The physician had been receiving regular payments disguised as consulting fees, with bonus structures tied to Amanda's declining health metrics. Both men were under federal arrest, charged with conspiracy, healthcare fraud, and attempted murder. The medical board immediately stripped Patterson of his license, and Hart's corporate assets were frozen pending trial. Henry testified before a federal grand jury, his quiet dignity and obvious honesty making him an exceptionally credible witness. The prosecutors told him later that his testimony had been the cornerstone of their case, the human element that made abstract financial crimes feel real and urgent. Hart was ultimately sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, while Dr. Patterson received 15 years and permanent revocation of his medical license. The Sterling Corporate Board underwent complete restructuring with new policies requiring independent medical oversight for all executive health programs. Amanda was vindicated publicly and professionally, her reputation not only restored but enhanced by her cooperation with federal investigators. But personal victory came with unexpected costs that neither Henry nor Amanda had fully anticipated. The media attention had made Henry a minor celebrity, which he despised, and had also made him effectively unemployable in his previous profession. Corporate cleaning services didn't want to hire someone who might be recognized by their clients from television appearances. Amanda tried to offer him a position in Sterling's new employee wellness program, but Henry declined with gentle firmness. "I appreciate the offer more than you know," Henry told Amanda in her office one final time, surrounded by the expensive furniture and corporate awards that represented her world. "But I think we both understand that the media circus changed everything between us." Amanda's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly, revealing the vulnerable woman he'd found in the conference room. "Does it have to change everything?" she asked quietly. And Henry heard the loneliness in her voice that no amount of professional success could fill. He looked around the office at the vast windows overlooking Lake Michigan, at the symbols of power and achievement that would always separate their worlds. "I think it already has," he said gently, "but that doesn't mean what happened between us was wrong. It was probably the most right thing either of us has done in years." Amanda nodded slowly, understanding passing between them like a current of electricity. They had saved each other in ways that transcended medicine. But some bridges were meant to be crossed only once. Henry stood in the sunny main room of his art therapy studio, watching Oliver help an elderly stroke survivor relearn how to hold a paintbrush with confidence and patience. The Second Sight Art Studio occupied the ground floor of what had once been a Sterling corporate satellite building, purchased with money from the book deal and speaking engagements that had followed the trial. Amanda had restructured her company around employee health and wellness, moving to smaller headquarters across town. But Henry knew she still drove past his studio every Friday afternoon. He'd seen her familiar black sedan slow down as it passed, seeing her silhouette behind the tinted windows, though she never stopped or acknowledged his presence. Oliver had asked him once why the pretty lady with flowers didn't visit anymore, and Henry had struggled to explain concepts of love and loss that even adults found difficult to navigate. "Sometimes people care about each other in ways that don't fit into normal categories," he'd finally told his son. "That doesn't mean the caring is less real or less important." Oliver had accepted this explanation with the wisdom that sometimes comes to children who've learned early that life doesn't always follow storybook patterns. As Henry cleaned paintbrushes in the studio's small kitchen, he noticed Amanda's car parked across the street for longer than usual. Through the large windows, he watched her get out and approach the front door, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. She leaned the package against the door without knocking, then returned to her car and drove away. Henry waited several minutes before retrieving the package, unwrapping it to reveal a painting, amateur but deeply felt, showing Henry and Oliver working together in the studio, painted from the perspective of someone watching through glass. On the back, in Amanda's careful handwriting, were just 3 words: "What I see." Henry studied the painting for a long time, recognizing the love and loss embedded in every brushstroke. The way she'd captured the light falling across Oliver's concentrated face, the gentle attention in Henry's posture as he guided his son's artistic efforts. Henry placed his own painting by the door, a watercolor showing Oliver teaching the elderly stroke survivor to paint sunflowers, the image capturing hope and healing, and the beautiful passage of knowledge from one generation to the next. He titled it simply, "What We Become." When Amanda's car appeared right on schedule, Henry watched through the window as she discovered his response. She studied the painting for several minutes before carefully placing it in her car alongside her own. The pattern continued through the changing seasons. Every Friday, Amanda would park across the street and watch the studio for exactly 10 minutes before driving away. Sometimes she brought a painting, sometimes she simply sat in her car observing. And occasionally Henry would catch her eye through the window, and they would look at each other across the distance that had become their method of staying connected without crossing boundaries that couldn't be uncrossed. Oliver had grown accustomed to these Friday afternoon visits, accepting them with the profound wisdom that sometimes came to children who had learned early that love manifested in many different forms. "She doesn't need to come inside, Daddy," he told Henry one snowy afternoon as they watched Amanda's car disappear around the corner. "She just needs to know we're still here, still okay." Henry watched Amanda's footprints in the snow, already beginning to fade, and marveled at his son's intuitive understanding of complex adult emotions. As winter settled over Chicago with its familiar embrace of cold wind and early darkness, Henry found unexpected peace in the rhythm of his transformed life. Teaching art therapy to stroke survivors filled him with purpose that his previous work had never provided. Watching Oliver grow into a confident 9-year-old who could explain brain anatomy to curious visitors made him proud in ways he'd never imagined. Accepting Amanda's quiet Friday afternoon presence as a blessing that didn't require explanation or resolution gave him a kind of emotional stability he'd never expected to find again. There were moments when he wondered what might have been possible if they'd been different people from the same social world, free to love without the weight of media attention and class differences. But those moments passed like snow melting on warm glass, leaving behind something clearer and more enduring than romantic fantasy. Some connections, Henry had learned, transcended the human need for definition or conventional resolution. Some relationships were meant to exist in the spaces between traditional categories, expressing care through distance rather than proximity, through respect rather than possession. What existed between Henry Webb and Amanda Blackwell now had no name in any language, no cultural precedent that explained their careful choreography of presence and absence, of seeing and being seen without the need for conversation or physical contact. But every Friday afternoon when Amanda's car appeared across the street and Henry looked up from his easel to meet her eyes through the studio window, they both understood that some distances were sacred, holding more genuine love than physical touch could ever contain. In that mutual understanding, they had found something rarer than romance, a connection that honored what they'd shared while respecting what they couldn't have. The art therapy studio thrived as word spread about Henry's unique approach to stroke rehabilitation, his ability to combine medical knowledge with creative expression in ways that helped patients reclaim parts of themselves they'd thought were lost forever. Medical professionals began referring patients to him. Insurance companies started covering his sessions, and Oliver grew up surrounded by a community of people learning to heal through creativity and determination. On quiet Friday afternoons when the last patient had gone home, and father and son cleaned brushes together in comfortable silence, Henry sometimes caught glimpses of Amanda's reflection in the studio windows. Not her physical presence, but the influence she'd had on their lives. The way her brief passage through their world had opened doors to possibilities neither of them had imagined before. There were no words for what Henry and Amanda had become to each other, no conventional category that contained their ongoing dance of connection and separation. But in the space between what was and what might have been, they had created something beautiful and sustainable. A love that didn't demand consummation, a caring that didn't require possession, a bond that grew stronger through restraint rather than indulgence. Every Friday afternoon, when their eyes met across the distance that separated their worlds, they renewed an unspoken promise to honor what they'd shared while protecting what they'd both learned to value more than their own desires. And in that weekly moment of recognition, they found a completeness that neither had expected, but both had earned through loss, courage, and the quiet wisdom that comes from truly understanding what it means to save someone's life. The story of Henry Webb and Amanda Blackwell delivers a powerful lesson. True compassion and knowledge can bridge even the widest divides, transforming lives through selfless acts of humanity. Henry, a humble janitor armed with his late wife's medical wisdom, saves Amanda, a high-powered CEO, not once but twice, proving that value lies not in status or wealth, but in the courage to act when others turn away. Their unlikely bond, forged through shared vulnerability and sustained by silent Friday afternoon glances, teaches us that love and connection often thrive in restraint and respect, not possession. Henry's sacrifice, trading his quiet life for public scrutiny to expose a corporate conspiracy, shows that standing up for what's right, even at great personal cost, can ripple outward, healing others. Amanda's paintings and Henry's art therapy studio reflect a mutual commitment to honor their shared experience while embracing separate paths. This tale urges us to look beyond appearances, to value the unseen heroes in our lives, and to cherish connections that don't demand definition but endure through quiet understanding. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been touched by an unexpected act of kindness or found a connection that defied convention? Your stories fuel our community. If Henry and Amanda's journey moved you, Hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories of courage and compassion. Let's keep celebrating the power of humanity to heal and connect. Subscribe now and be part of our mission to honor the unsung heroes among us.